Chemical Feast, the Nader Report on Food Protection at the Food and Drug Administration, the book being hailed by Time Magazine. Here he is with Betty Martini. Hello, James. How are you, sir?
Hi, George. How are you?
Good.
Glad to be here.
Good to have you with us here as well. And, Betty, you jump in anytime, okay?
Okay. I think Jim knows the story so well. He was there. You're going to enjoy this.
This is an incredible story, James, of how how things get done by big business. 1965, the chemist accidentally comes up with aspartame, and all of a sudden, what happens? Who decides, let's take it to market, we can make money with this, and then what's the process?
Well, it was an ulcer drug, and the guy working on it put his finger in it, put it in his mouth, which chemists do, and he said, "My gosh, it's sweet." And the company said, "We can make more selling this to millions of people a little bit at a time than we can by selling it as a drug." And so off they went and started to do things that were quite strange. So, for example, Dr. John Olney at Washington University did some studies in 1970 and showed that the chemical they were working with caused actual holes in the brains of mice, little small microscopic holes. And he had the hypothesis that this might be the kind of thing that causes mental retardation. He got the people from the company, it was Searle at that time, to come down and repeat the experiments. They did. Their person did the experiments, repeated them, went back to the company and said, "Look, this stuff may be a serious problem." And interestingly enough, she disappeared from science from then on. Never heard from her again. She was gone. They continued for the next decade to do that. Those kinds of things. Dr. Olney and I objected to the FDA's approval of NutraSweet. It was called Aspartame at the time, and we asked for and got a public hearing. I actually met with the Searle folks before the FDA ruling in 1974, and I pointed out that these holes in the brain were going to make it very hard to get approval. They said they would get approval. I said they would never reach the market. And interestingly enough, the FDA approved it and then stayed the approval because they found so many problems in the laboratories of Searle. They had animals that were alive at the beginning of the experiment, died in the middle of the experiment, and then were alive at the end of the experiment. There's no evidence at all in the record that can be relied upon that establishes any safety. This then went on to the point where the Public Board of Inquiry, to have the hearing that we'd asked for, was held in 1980. And they ruled that the NutraSweet product, the aspartame, should not be marketed because of the possibility that it would cause brain tumors.
Jeez.
The animal study showed brain tumors. At that point, it was 1 month before Ronald Reagan was elected president. That was in October of 1980. November of 1980, Reagan was elected president, and then Donald Rumsfeld was on the transition team for Reagan, and he was the president of the Searle Company. And he held a meeting in January of 1981 saying to all of his Searle folks that he was going to call in all his chips in Washington and get NutraSweet approved by the FDA. Mm-hmm. The new FDA commissioner, who had been a contract physician at the Department of Defense when Rumsfeld was Defense Secretary, came to the FDA, and the first act he did was to approve NutraSweet for aspartame for dry foods, and then 2 years later, his last act under his administration was to approve it for diet sodas.
And didn't he, James? Wasn't it? It was losing in the FDA by a 3-2 vote, and the new commissioner, Arthur Hayes Hull, brings in another person, so the vote gets tied, and then he breaks the vote. With his own vote. Did that happen like that?
Well, that's one way of looking at it, but there's an even more interesting way of looking at it, and that is that there ultimately ended being 6 people on the panel, and they did, in fact, 3 of them said they would support approval, and 3 of them said they would not support approval. Interestingly enough, it was unanimous that the 3 cancer experts said they would not approve the NutraSweet. The other 3 supported the Public Board of Inquiry's notion that they could not prove that the phenylketonuria problem that is recognized by everyone was a generalized population problem. basically what happened is all 6 of these people supported the Public Board of Inquiry's ruling. The Public Board of Inquiry said, okay, on this problem of brain damage, we don't see enough evidence to raise a serious problem on brain damage.
Except for Hall.
On cancer, we see it, we're concerned, we're going to ban it. And that was a ban. He had to overturn that ban in order to make it work, and he did exactly what you said. He read the ruling to be 3-4, 3 against. I'll break the tie, and we'll let it out.
And then
in fact, it was unanimous that the thing causes cancer among the cancer, that could cause cancer among the cancer experts.
And then what happened to him, the FDA commissioner? Didn't he leave the FDA under some allegations?
He left the FDA under a cloud because he had been riding in the General Foods airplane improperly. In fact, General Foods was one of the original sponsors of aspartame, and then they dropped back because there were some serious problems in the early studies, and Searle then ended up taking the brunt of it. But he was disciplined for riding in the General Foods plane. When I say disciplined, basically they asked him to resign before they went into a serious hearing.
Would you tell them about the executive order, how far they had to go?
Well, before we do that, let's just catch up with this one point that Hayes went on to become the senior medical advisor to Burson Marsteller, the company that was the Searle company's Washington strategist, the PR company.
Exactly.
and we talked to them about that, and we said, how can you do this? And they said to us, it was really amazing. They said, all the money that he's paid comes from something other than Searle, because we sequestered the Searle money so he doesn't get paid by the Searle money. I mean, now this is like Alice in Wonderland to have that sort of
it's like he was taken care of, and they tucked him away somewhere.
And he has never been willing, able, or agreed to any kind of interview subsequent to that action.
Is he at the public relations company now? Is he still around?
He was only a consultant to the public relations company. That was a way of funneling money to him. No, he's back on a medical school faculty, I believe, up in New York. But Betty also just raised an interesting point, and that is that remember that the Public Board of Inquiry had ruled in October of 1980 that this stuff could not be marketed. That's a final ruling, and it is determinative of the situation unless the FDA commissioner overturns it. Well, the day that Reagan was sworn in, or the day after Reagan was sworn in, according to Jerry Goyen, who was the FDA commissioner at the time, he received a direction, an order. It was actually an executive order telling him that he was not able to make any decisions at that point, and they were going to replace him. It took about 6 weeks to replace him.
And wasn't Rumsfeld, who was the CEO of G.D. Searle, on that team, that transition team, that was going to pick the new FDA commissioner?
Absolutely he was. And Senator Metzenbaum did a thorough investigation. They cannot find out who proposed Arthur Hall Hayes for FDA commissioner. He just showed up out of nowhere. What we do know is that he was a contract physician at the Defense Department when Rumsfeld was Secretary of Defense. He was doing a couple of studies. And in fact, part of the reason that he was asked to leave the FDA was that there was a study done by the Army Inspector General that he had exposed recruits to pharmaceutical products improperly. Interestingly enough, at the time he was having his NutraSweet problems at FDA, or taking his actions, he was also proposing a significant relaxation in human testing at FDA. Basically, he was there to do somebody else's business, and when it got too hot for him, he was taken away, taken out, and given a nice sinecure to just keep his mouth shut and stay out of the
Isn't it interesting how Rumsfeld's name, Jim, pops up in the G.D. Searle case with aspartame, with the Iraq War, with everything that just seems to have a cloud? There he is.
My sense, he actually arranged to have a meeting with me, which I did. I spent a few hours with him.
What'd you think of him personally?
Well, I proposed. I did not think very much of him at the end of this meeting. It was not the end of the meeting, but 6 months later. It was about a 6-month process. We had this meeting, and I said, look,